Spoiler of the Red Chamber, Daiyu's mentality collapses. Introduction. A modern surgeon who travels through time to become the illegitimate son of the Red Chamber, Huan San Ye. First time meeting Daiyu.Jia Huan said, Sister Lin, when the Lianbao sees you, she will definitely say, I have seen this sister before. Jia Huan sent flowers, and Daiyu was about to ask. Jia Huan asked first. First imitate Daiyu's voice. Is it for me alone or all sisters? A male voice said, all sisters have them, and others have them. These two are Sister Lin's. Change Daiyu's voice again and say, I knew that others wouldn't give me the rest unless they choose. Daiyu. Puff. Brother Huan, you know how to arrange people. I have to tear your mouth apart. I can't spare you any more today. Jia Huan. Sister Lin, they are all bad people who are trying to harm you. Chapter 1. Jia Fu Huan San Ye. You are listening at novel full.audio. Huan'er, hurry your short-lived ghost aunt's dead maid Daiyu into the mansion tomorrow, and then you can go to the old lady's house and come back. Don't stay too long, it's disgusting. Upon hearing this news, Jia Huan's face suddenly turned strange, and he didn't know what was on his mind. For a moment, he was lost in thought. Aunt Zhao didn't receive a response and angrily cursed, You are a wicked person with a maggot heart, an unruly seed, and a low-footed chicken that can't climb the platform. Where are you talking to me? Are you stuffed with donkey hair in your ears? Jia Huan sighed and said, Mom, I understand. If you have nothing else to do, I'll go practice calligraphy. After speaking, he turned around and walked into the study, slowly grinding ink, laying paper, and starting to practice calligraphy. Upon seeing this scene, Aunt Zhao muttered to herself, Stinky kid, since I recovered from my illness for the past 3 days, it's like a different person holding books at home every day. Those gentlemen who passed the imperial examination are all stars descending from the sky. Can you just read and write recklessly to pass the exam? You've wasted all these paper and ink. Although she said so, Aunt Zhao's face showed a hint of relief. She quietly left the room, afraid of disturbing Jia Huan's hard work. In the study, Jia Huan was restless and had a dog-like expression. No wonder I've been feeling like something's wrong these past 3 days. Now I've finally found the reason. Jia Huanben was a senior surgeon who fainted in the operating room after undergoing an 8-hour surgery. With his eyes closed and wide open, he inexplicably arrived at the world of the Red Chamber, and even crossed over to become his illegitimate son Jia Huan. He wants to cry without tears. He really doesn't want to travel. In his previous life, he had a car and a house. Although his work was tiring, his salary and bonus increased by tens of thousands per month. There is also an 80% new young and beautiful wife, who has just traveled through time before her freshness has passed. What's the key? No system, no computer, no grandpa, no golden finger. The key is that you can travel through dynasties such as Tang, Song, Yuan, Ming, and Qing, even if you don't have many golden fingers. In the end, you can still come up with something. No more pretending, showdown, I am a traveler. At least there is also the benefits of the traveler profit and the ability to play a spoiler or something. Traveling through the world of red mansions, can you play a series of spoilers with yarn? 99% of the plot unfolds in the Jia family. Jia Huan didn't even know who the Jia family had placed both bets on, and it was difficult to correct any mistakes. Jia Huan had been traveling for 3 days before he had a chance to understand the background of his dynasty. He only familiarized himself with the Jia mansion, which was similar to what was described in Dream of the Red Chamber, but he always felt something was wrong. When Jia Huan heard Aunt Zhao talk about Lin Daiyu entering the mansion tomorrow, he suddenly realized that the timeline was not aligned. Jia Huan is already 12 years old this year, Lin Daiyu should be 1 year and 13 years older than her, and Jia Baoyu is 2 years and 14 years older than him. In the original work, Lin Daiyu entered Beijing at the age of 6, so, this journey took 7 years. The timeline doesn't align at all. That is to say, now he has lost his only prophetic advantage in the development of the Jia family plot. However, soon Jia Huan remembered that in the Yimao version, Lin Daiyu entered the Jia mansion for the first time. Wang Shifeng asked her how old she was, and she replied that she was 13 years old. On other versions, Lin Daiyu did not answer. Based on this speculation, it is highly likely that in the initial draft of Mr. Chao Shuaqin, Lin Daiyu entered Beijing at the age of 13. So why did she later change her age to 6? Probably because if she had been 13 years old when she entered Beijing, by the time the plot of the Grand View Garden unfolded, Jia Baoyu and Lin Daiyu would have reached the ages of 20.2 and 20.3. A group of girls in their 20s and 30s, along with Jia Baoyu in their 20s and 30s, are constantly wandering around the Grand View Garden without getting married. The plot is completely unfounded. So later on, the age was repeatedly compressed. But after compression, there is something wrong again. For example, in a book, it describes the 7-year-old Jia Baoyu as follows. A natural period of flirtatiousness is all about the eyebrows and the corners of the eyes. What is the word tiger and wolf? Can it be used to describe a 7-year-old boy? A 7-year-old boy who grew up afraid of drinking Sanlu milk powder and consuming high-tech ingredients such as puffing agents, ripening agents, fragrance enhancers, fresheners, and preservatives in future generations, isn't he so charming? And for a 14-year-old boy, this description is quite appropriate. So, when Lin Daiyu entered the Jia mansion at the age of 13, it should be the correct way to open it. Thinking of this, Jia Huan finally breathed a sigh of relief. Jia Huan thought of Lin Daiyu, a talented woman. Lin Daiyu's short life can be described as a combination of cup sets, dish sets, and tableware. In his childhood, he lost his younger brother, then his mother, and resided in the Jia family. He suffered various open and hidden attacks, and within a few years, his father Lin Ruhai was still dead. Lin Ruhai, on his deathbed, entrusted his entire family fortune of at least 23 million taels of silver and Lin Daiyu to the Jia family. These 2 or 3 million taels of silver are Lin Daiyu's dowry and her private property, which will be taken away when she gets married. Afterwards, Yuan Chun, the eldest daughter of the Jia family, was granted the title of virtuous consort and built the Grand View Garden for her provincial relatives. Due to a shortage of silver, she embezzled Lin Daiyu's dowry with her permission. And the Jia family cannot afford to pay off this debt. Lin Daiyu's dowry was spent before she even got married. So, there are only 2 paths left for Lin Daiyu. The first way is to marry into the Jia family. The second way is to die in the Jia mansion. Yu reading www.yuyukeangshu.net. It is absolutely impossible for the Jia family to let Lin Daiyu leave the Jia family, because once the news of the Jia family swallowing Lin Daiyu's dowry spreads, the reputation of the Jia family will immediately stink and they will be unable to establish themselves in the aristocratic family. Why did Empress Wu Zetian hear the proclamation of King Luobin and be so frightened that her brush fell to the ground? Just because of this sentence. A handful of soil is not dry, why should a 6-foot orphan be entrusted? In the end, Mrs. Wang, who was fasting and reciting Buddhism, defeated her mother-in-law Jia Mu and chose the second path. Lin Daiyu ultimately died in the Jia family and was wiped out by the Jia family. Thinking of these, Jia Huan couldn't help but sigh with regret. Since I have traveled to the world of red mansions, I will do my best to help her within my ability range. Of course, if it goes beyond one's ability range, then there is nothing we can do to help. Because now, Jia Huan's first priority is to save himself. In about 10 years, the Jia mansion will end up in a white and clean land. As the illegitimate son of the Jia family, Jia Huan naturally had to be buried with him. The only way that Jia Huan could think of to save the Jia family was through the imperial examination. As for martial arts, I can't even think about it. The legitimate eldest grandson of Rongwa Mansion, Jiao Yan, donated an unremarkable assistant. Jia Huan, a 12-year-old commoner with a second wife, wants to pursue martial arts. Not to mention that he is still underage, let's just say whether Mrs. Wang will agree and that's it. As for doing business, it is even less likely to change the fate of the Jia family. Doing business and becoming rich is simply adding fuel to the fire, fearing that others may criticize the Jia family for not being fat enough, right? As for the idea of leaving the Jia family and others, it is not realistic. Only through the imperial examination can there be a glimmer of possibility to save the Jia family. Chapter 2. Huan'er, have you changed your sex? You are listening at novelfull.audio. Even the journey of the imperial examination is full of difficulties. Ultimately, the time is too short. Even within 10 years, it may not be possible to reach the stage of passing the exam. In his previous life, Jia Huan studied medicine and could not be said to be completely ignorant of the 4 books and 5 classics, but could only be said to have limited knowledge. Fortunately, as a traveler, although I don't have a system, computer, or golden fingers like Grandpa Whitebeard, I still have some benefits at least. Firstly, people have become more handsome. The impression given by Dream of the Red Chamber is that Jia Huan is a lewd and ugly broken child. But upon careful consideration, Jia Huan's parents have no bad genes at all. Although Jia Zheng is a hypocrite, he is also a middle-aged and beautiful man. Although Aunt Zhao is not in a good mood, she is also a beauty with a beauty of at least 85 points or more. Marry a wife, marry a virtuous person, and take concubines and women. If Aunt Zhao is not beautiful, how could Jia Zheng spoil her alone? How could it be possible to have a son and a daughter? Look at Jia Huan's sister Tanchuan's appearance. Slim shoulders, long waist, long figure, duck-egg face, handsome eyes and eyebrows, looking forward to the essence of Shenfei's literary colors, forget the customs when you see it. Can we still have a genetic mutation when we reach Jia Huan's place? On the first day of crossing over, Jia Huan reluctantly accepted the fact of crossing over and once looked in the mirror. I discovered that I am definitely a handsome man. So the reason for giving people a bad impression is probably because they were supported and disabled by Aunt Zhao. Think about it, if you just shrug your shoulders, tilt your head, and sneakily glance at people, isn't this image completely ruined? After Jia Huan held his head high and stared straight at the sunny sun, he immediately looked like a different person from before. Even Aunt Zhao, her biological mother, was amazed by it. Fortunately, it is still getting better. Aunt Zhao attributed it to the tree being big and straightforward, and did not overly doubt it. The second benefit is that he has a great appetite and can eat from poor families when placed in common people's homes. The benefit is that you eat more and your physical fitness also improves accordingly. For 3 days, Jia Huan could feel his strength slowly increasing. The third benefit is to never forget it. It is precisely because of his ability to never forget it that Jia Huan set the goal of self-rescue through the imperial examination. Of course, having the ability to never forget is far from enough. The imperial examination does not test rote memorization. However, as a top student who passed the 985 exam in his previous life, Jia Huan still had some confidence in the exam. Although the knowledge learned in previous lives is completely unrelated to the imperial examination, the ability of academic elites to summarize and generalize is solid. Jia Huan's study plan is to make full use of his ability to remember everything and memorize a lot of questions. Although Jia Huan has not yet figured out the background of the dynasty, he can also see from the book that this world has Tang, Song, Yuan, and Ming dynasties. Since the imperial examination, all the sentences in the 4 books have been tested multiple times, and even there are cut-and-match questions. And since he has an unforgettable ability, he can definitely memorize all the excellent essays. During exams, one can learn from and pay tribute to others, and then freely perform without worrying about getting high scores. As a top student, I still have this confidence. In 3 days, Jia Huan had already memorized all of a university. In fact, it only took less than a day to truly memorize, and there were 2 days left for Jia Huan to silently write and practice calligraphy. In his past life, in order to practice wrist stability, Jia Huan would spend an hour every day writing with a brush after work. I can't say I have much expertise, but I still have a solid foundation in calligraphy. After crossing over, Jia Huan's calligraphy became indescribable. What Jia Huan does every day now is to adapt to his new body and regain calligraphy. The exam should use the style of Guangu, which is somewhat similar to regular script but different from regular script. Jia Huan is confident that in 3 to 4 months, he can practice his calligraphy well and at least achieve the goal of not losing any exam scores. 3 or 4 months is enough for him to memorize all the 4 books and 5 classics. Learn to solve problems and memorize some current articles when the time comes, and you can take the entrance exam for a scholar next year. Once one truly achieves the title of a scholar, there will be a township examination in August next year. After passing the township examination, there will be a joint examination in February of the following year. If everything goes smoothly, within 2 years, he will be able to achieve fame and become an official. I've been thinking too much. Now not only does he not even know how to solve problems, but he also doesn't have a teacher. During this period, Baoyu has not yet entered the ethnic school. Jia Zheng invited an enlightenment gentleman to enlighten Baoyu. Aunt Zhao begged for Jia Huan to also study together, but was sent away by Mrs. Wang on the grounds that Jia Huan was still young. After memorizing the 4 books and 5 classics, Jia Huan needs to first find a teacher to teach him how to solve problems. This morning, he will be able to finish college silently. You can recite the doctrine of the mean in the afternoon. At this moment, Aunt Zhao shouted outside, "Huan'er, come and have dinner soon." "Here you go, mother." Jia Huan was raised by Aunt Zhao, and although he was a commoner, he was still considered a legitimate master in the Jia family. And Aunt Zhao was born from the family, and among the concubines, she was only the lowest and most lowly concubine, with a status only 1 level higher than the servants. Aunt Zhao's meals and Jia Huan's are different. However, according to Aunt Zhao's greedy personality, as long as Jia Zheng is not around, he always follows Jia Huan to grab a meal. A 7 or 8-year-old girl named Xia Jixiang smiled and arranged the dishes. Jia Huan went to wash her hands and sat down at the table. Aunt Zhao muttered and scolded, "Huan'er, reading is naturally good, but you don't have to struggle like that. You reading www.uukangshu.net, look at that short-lived Juga. He studies harder than you, but what happens in the end?" Although he entered school, did he still suffer from physical exhaustion and end up dead? If the fortune is shallow, we can't force too much. If we burn our bodies, do you want me to rely on that? Our families can't short you anything. Although Aunt Zhao spoke in a subtle tone, Jia Huan's heart warmed upon hearing it. In his previous life, he was an orphan and had never felt maternal love. And now, he feels it. It feels good to have a motherly feeling. He nodded and said, "I know, mother. I will take care of myself." Aunt Zhao exclaimed, "Huan'er, have you really changed your personality? As usual, when I say 1 word to you, you stare and tug at your neck with 10 words waiting for me. Why are you so obedient now?" Jia Huan's transformation cannot be concealed from anyone, let alone from Aunt Zhao, who raised him by his side since childhood. And Jia Huan had already figured out the wording. He whispered, "Mom, during those days when I was sick, I thought I was going to die, and I thought I couldn't be by your side anymore. When I think of this, I feel like a needle prick in my heart. At that time, I regretted not listening to you before and even making you angry. I was afraid that I would never have the chance to be filial to you again in the future. After I recovered from my illness, I naturally changed. I will always be filial to my mother and never make you angry again." Listening to Jia Huan's words, Aunt Zhao's eyes had already turned red, tears streaming down her spine and she couldn't wipe them clean. Even Xiao Jixiang wiped away her tears on the side. Jia Huan leaned forward and gently patted Aunt Zhao's back, saying, "Mom, stop crying and eat." Aunt Zhao wiped hard a few times and said with a crying voice, "Eat." Chapter 3. First Meeting with Daiyu. You are listening at novelfull.audio. At the dinner table, Aunt Zhao finished her meal early and stared blankly at Jia Huan. "It's a good thing for my son to be able to eat, unlike in the past, where he didn't eat half a bowl of rice at a meal, only meat and no vegetables, and wouldn't listen to anything. But it's so delicious and also scary. Huan'er, you only had 2 bowls of rice yesterday, and now you've already eaten the 3rd bowl, right? Why don't you eat less? It's not fun to hold on." Jia Huan took a few gulps of the rice from his bowl and put it down with a smile, saying, "Mom, you can rest assured. It was just delicious and full, so you can hold on wherever you go. People say that, half a boy eats a poor old man, and it's natural for me to eat more when I'm older." Aunt Zhao patted her chest and said, "That's good, that's good." Next to him, Xiao Jixiang smiled and said, "Third master, if you're not full, there's still a bowl of rice here." Previously, Jia Huan often snatched Xia Jixiang's monthly money, stole her things, and even bullied her. Xiao Jixiang hates Jia Huan very much. Since Jia Huan recovered from his illness 3 days ago, he no longer bullied her, which made Xiao Jixiang fall in love with Jia Huan. Jia Huan said to Xiao Jixiang, "Jixiang, there are still some vegetables left here. If you don't mind, it will be enough for your lunch. If you don't mind, you can take it and throw it away, and go get your own food." Xiao Jixiang chuckled and said, "Third Lord cares for us. The rest of the food is something Third Lord has never touched before. How can we have any reason to dislike it? These are enough for me and Sister Rui to use. Third Lord, then I'll go down and have dinner with Sister Rui." Jia Huan nodded and said, "Go quickly." Xiao Jixiang packed up the leftovers and eagerly took them out. The dishes that San Ye eats are all made by the little chef, and they can't eat them. Normally, the 3rd master would rather pour out the leftovers than give them to eat. And these days, the 3rd master not only rewarded them with leftover food. Even this leftover food is a small part that San Ye has never touched before. Xiao Jixiang was carrying leftovers when suddenly he felt that the sunlight outside had become much brighter. After eating, Jia Huan did not immediately go to indoors. "But I walked slowly in the yard for half an hour before finally going to the study." In the afternoon, Jia Huan finished memorizing the doctrine of the mean and then began to study silently. After dinner, Jia Huan exercised his body, washed it, and then went to bed without reading. Nowadays, there is a fixed number of candles in his room every month, with a maximum of 1 candle per night. And the candlelight of the candle is weak, so if you study hard night and night, you may soon become nearsighted. Although reading is urgent, it is not so urgent. The next morning, Jia Huan woke up early. At that moment, the 2 little girls, Jixiang Rui, were still sleeping soundly, but Jia Huan didn't wake them up. After exercising for a while, Jia Huan went out for a run. Keep running eastward to the wall of Huifang Garden, then follow the wall southward to the south wall and turn back. This time, it's almost 1,500 meters long. After running back, Jia Huan was panting heavily and sweated profusely. "Although I have eaten a lot these days and my body has gradually become stronger, my foundation has ultimately weakened. The weather has cooled down now, and Jia Huan didn't bring hot water either. He only washed his face with cold water. Then I went to the study to start silent reading." After he wrote a few pieces of paper, the 2 auspicious girls yawned and walked in. After entering, Rui quickly apologized and said, "Third Lord, it's all our fault that we slept until this time. Why didn't Third Lord ask us to get up and serve him when he got up?" Jia Huan smiled slightly and said, "It's not that you woke up late, it's that I woke up early. You are at an age of sleepiness, and only when you get enough sleep can you feel energized. It's irrelevant, hurry up and get busy with your work. Rui quickly said, yes, thank you very much, third master. The two of them held hands and left. Xiao Jixiang smiled and said, Sister Rui, I'll just say that third master won't blame us, right? You're being too cunning. Rui said solemnly, although the master is kind, we are increasingly unable to obtain the will, and this is the case. Xiao Jixiang quickly said, I know. Let's go wash up quickly. After breakfast, Jia Huan instructed Xiao Jixiang, you can go to the old lady's yard and watch later. If Miss Lin comes, you can come and tell me. Xiao Jixiang clenched his fists and said, delight. After speaking, he turned around and ran out in a flash. Jia Huan laughed heartily and walked for half an hour before continuing to study silently. It wasn't until lunch that Xia Jixiang came to report in the afternoon. Third master, Miss Lin has arrived and has already entered the old lady's yard. Jia Huan waited for another moment before getting up and walking towards Rongqing Tang's mother. Entering Rongqing Hall, the little girls were busy, but no one lifted the curtain to announce. Jia Huan lifted the curtain and walked in. Jia Mu sat at the top, with a girl sitting with her back to him beside her. It must be Lin Daiyu. Madame Xing and Madame Wang sat one on the left and one on the right, with Wang Shifeng and the daughters of Yingchun and Tanchun sitting below in sequence. After entering the house, Jia Huan greeted his mother and said, my grandson pays respects to our ancestors, eldest wife, and wife. Upon hearing the sound, Jia Mu looked up and asked with a puzzled expression, whose child is this from? He looks even better than Baoyu. Wang Shifeng chuckled and said, ancestor, this is Huan'er. It can be seen that ancestor is biased. Yu reading www.yuukangshu.net. Now that I have met my legitimate granddaughter, I don't even recognize my own legitimate grandson. Jia Mu smiled and said, unfortunately, Yufeng girl is good at talking. Brother Huan has been sick and hasn't seen you in the past few days. Seeing you today seems like a different person. It's actually a good person. Brother Huan, this is your sister Lin. At this moment, Lin Daiyu stood up and turned around, and Jia Huan finally saw Lin Daiyu's appearance clearly. I saw her. With two curved eyebrows that seemed to be neither furrowed nor smoky, and a pair of eyes that seemed to be neither happy nor affectionate. Her expression was filled with worries about her temples, and her body was covered in illness. Tears streamed down her face, and she panted faintly. When she was still, she was like a beautiful flower shining on the water, and her movements were like weak willows supporting the wind. Her heart was more than dry, and her body was as sick as Shizi Xingsan. Jia Huan couldn't help but give a thumbs up in his heart. It's truly Lin Mimi who fell from the sky, fortunately not with her face on the ground. Jia Huan said, I have seen Sister Lin. Lin Daiyu said, I have seen Brother Huan. Please be safe now, Lin Daiyu has also seen it, and Jia Huan is ready to leave. The old lady doesn't like to see him, so Mrs. Wang doesn't like to see him even more. Just now, when Jia Huan saw Mrs. Wang looking at him, there was a hint of disgust and malice in her eyes. Jia Huan said, ancestor, my grandson won't bother you anymore. Please leave, grandson. Jia's mother likes to have good children the most, although she usually despises Jia Huan. Today, Jia Huan has turned into a different person, which has brought some joy to Jia's mother. She couldn't help but say, Brother Huan, your sister Lin is here. If you don't say to accompany her and talk to her, let her not be too sad. Instead, you should avoid it. What's the point? You just stay here, you guys talk a little bit, and we'll have dinner together here before we go back. Did you hear me? Jia Huan had no choice but to say helplessly, when our ancestors speak, how dare our grandchildren not comply? Chapter 4. Spoiler Red Chamber. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. Jia Mu asked a few young people to speak, while Wang Shifeng played along in front of Jia Mu, Mrs. Xing, and Mrs. Wang. Lin Daiyu sat next to Shichuan, and Jia Huan sat beside her. Tanchun first asked Jia Huan, "Huan'er, are you doing well now?" Jia Huan said, "Sister Lao San is worried, she is already doing well." Welcoming and cherishing Spring also inquired separately, and Jia Huan responded one by one. At this moment, Wang Shifeng asked Mrs. Wang, "Has Madam received a letter from Aunt? I wonder when Aunt will enter Beijing." Upon hearing these words, several women couldn't help but look up and listen. Jia Huan saw that everyone had never looked here before, so he whispered to Daiyu, "Sister Lin, the big-face treasure will come later. It's Baoyu. He has a serious mental illness." Lin Daiyu snorted and almost burst out laughing. Jia Huan continued, "If he saw you, he would definitely say he had seen you before. The ancestors would say he was talking nonsense, and the Lianbao would say, although I have never seen him before, I have a kind face, and even though I am an old acquaintance, it is not impossible for me to reunite today as a farewell. Then he asks you if you have any characters, and he will give you a character called Frown. He will also ask if you have jade, knowing that you don't have jade will make you sick, and he will throw his jade hard. Also, when we arrive at Mrs. Eyre's room, they all want to harm you. They want you to sit on the head, but don't sit on it. Well, after eating, the ancestors will move Baoyu out and arrange it in the Baisha cabinet. Baoyu will definitely stay on the bed outside the Baisha cabinet." Jia Huan's words gradually raised Lin Daiyu's eyebrows. She couldn't help but quietly gather chairs for Shichuan and no longer pay attention to Jia Huan. In his own words, this Jia Huan must have a serious mental illness. If not, how could such absurd words be said? The Lianbao. How could Baoyu know what he would say when he saw her? When I arrived at my second aunt's room, which servants would make me take the lead? In this world, how could there ever be a reason for a niece to sit on her head in her uncle's room? As for those people who are trying to harm me, it's even more absurd. Okay, how could they possibly harm me? The last paragraph becomes even more absurd. Even if my ancestors really arranged me in the Baisha cabinet, how could they let Baoyu live on the bed outside the Baisha cabinet? The Jia family has a dual noble family, and there is no one who does not understand etiquette or the principle of incompatibility between men and women. Brother Huan, his brain is seriously ill, so he must stay away from him in the future. Next, Lin Daiyu and the sisters Ying-chun, Tan-chun, and Shichuan spoke and quickly became familiar with each other, but she threw Jia Huan aside. "Jia Huan ignored me. Now, whether you like to answer me or not, I will surprise you later." At this moment, the fruit platter was removed from the house, and Mother Jia ordered 2 maids to take Lin Daiyu to meet her 2 uncles. Mrs. Xing stood up and smiled back, "It's cheaper for me to bring my niece over." Jia Mu smiled and said, "Exactly. You should go too, there's no need to come over." Madame Xing agreed with a word, yes, and then took Daiyu and Madame Wang as resignations. Lin Daiyu went to her uncle Jia Shi's house, but Jia Shi did not come out to meet her. After sitting for a while, she got up and said goodbye. Madame Xing personally escorted the carriage to the gate of the ceremony and instructed everyone to watch as the car went and returned. I quickly arrived at my second uncle Jia Zheng's house and entered, but Mrs. Wang was not there. Lin Daiyu looked at the furnishings in the room and saw. There are 4 chairs in a row on the west side of the underground, all covered with silver-red floral chairs, and 4 pairs of foot pedals below. There is also a pair of high tables on both sides of the chair, with tea bowls, bottles, and flowers on top. There is no need to elaborate on the other furnishings. The old ladies asked Daiyu to sit on the kong, but there were 2 brocade mattresses on the edge of the kong. This paragraph is the original text of Dream of the Red Chamber. At this moment, Lin Daiyu couldn't help but be surprised. It was clear that there were seats for her second uncle and second aunt on the kong. She suddenly remembered what Jia Huan had said to her at Jia's mother's place. He mentioned the second wife's room, and they all wanted to harm you. They asked you to sit on the head, but you must not sit. At that time, I thought he had a serious mental illness. How could there be a reason for my niece to sit at my uncle's house? If she really sits up, perhaps she doesn't understand the language of etiquette, and it will soon spread throughout the entire Jia family, right? At that time, even with the love of her grandmother, there would be no place for her to stay in the Jia family anymore. Are these women in my second uncle's room trying to destroy her? Why are these people so bad? Aren't they afraid that their second aunt will know? Daiyu pondered as she sat on the chair to the east, eating tea instead of going up to the Kong. Before finishing the tea, a maid wearing a red silk jacket and a green satin vest walked over and smiled, saying, "Madam, please invite Miss Lin to sit over there." The old lady listened and then led Daiyu out to 3 small main rooms in the east corridor. A Kong table is horizontally placed on the main room Kong, on which books and tea utensils are placed. A semi-old blue satin backrest cushion is placed on the east wall and west side. Mrs. Wang sat on the west side, with a semi-old blue satin back cushion underneath. When she saw Daiyu coming, she made her way east. This paragraph is the original text of Dream of the Red Chamber. To the east must be the seat where my uncle Jia Jing sits. At this moment, Lin Daiyu's heart had already stirred up turbulent waves. So, my aunt is also the one who wants to harm me. Originally, Brother Huan mentioned that there were all bad people in Mrs. Eyre's room who wanted to harm her. Surprisingly, even Aunt Eyre was included among these people. Fortunately, Lin Daiyu had already lost her composure. No matter how frightened she was inside, she didn't show any signs on her face. As Daiyu saw 3 chairs leaning against the Kong, which were also covered with semi-old ink-bouncing chairs, she sat down on the chairs. Yu reading www.yuyukangshu.net. Mrs. Wang took her up to the Kong 4 times, and she sat next to Mrs. Wang. Next, Mrs. Wang talked about Jia Zheng's fasting today and not being able to see each other. She asked Lin Daiyu and her 3 sisters to play together and not pay attention to Baoyu. Lin Daiyu smiled and said, "Is my aunt talking about the brother who was born to Zhuyu? When I was at home, I also heard my mother often say that this brother is 1 year older than me, and his nickname is Baoyu. Although he is extremely silly and stubborn, he said that he is excellent in a sisterly relationship. Besides, when I come here, I will only be with my sister. My brothers are from another courtyard, so why bother with him?" Mrs. Wang smiled and said, "You don't know why. He's different from others. Since childhood, he was pampered along with his sisters because of the old lady's love. If his sisters ignore him one day, he would be quieter. Even if he's not interesting, he'll just vent his anger and mutter about his 2 little ones behind his back after leaving Ermine. If his sisters say one more word to him on this day, he will have many troubles in his heart. So I advise you not to pay attention to him. He talks sweet words for a while, has no day for a while, and is crazy and foolish at the same time, just don't believe him." In no time, a girl came to pass on the news, saying that Jia Mu had passed on dinner somewhere. Mrs. Wang then sent Lin Daiyu over. Jia Mu sat alone on the front couch, with 4 empty chairs on either side. Shifeng quickly pulled Daiyu to sit on the first chair on the left, and Daiyu gave in very much. Jia Mu smiled and said, "Your aunt and sister-in-law are not eating here. You should have sat like this as a guest." Daiyu Fang took a seat and sat down. Mrs. Jia ordered Mrs. Wang to sit down, and the 3 sisters of Ingchun took their seats. Ingchun then sat first on her right hand, second on Tanchuan's left, and second on Shichuan's right. Jia Huan sat next to Tanchun on her left hand. The maid next to her was persistently brushing the dust, washing dishes, towels, and handkerchiefs. Li Feng and the other 2 stood by the table, giving way. Chapter 5. Can Baoyu really throw jade? You are listening at novelfull.audio. When Jia Mu picked up chopsticks, everyone followed suit to eat. Many women have a small appetite, and in addition, they are all young ladies from wealthy families. They pay attention to not showing their teeth when eating, and chew carefully and slowly. And Jia Huan has digested well, so he will be hungry long ago. Jia's meals were originally prepared by a dedicated chef, and with the arrival of Lin Daiyu, they were very abundant. Under Jia Huan's chopsticks flew like a flying bird, feasting on them. The bowl for serving rice here is also small, and Jia Huan ate up a bowl of rice in just 3 or 2 bites. These 3 days, he has changed his meal to a big bowl. He is afraid that he will have to eat more than 10 bowls of rice for this small bowl. Jia Huan put down his bowl and asked the maid, "Your bowl is too small to eat well. Please change it to a larger bowl and serve me a larger bowl of rice." Jia's mother had extremely strict rules. Although there were many daughters-in-law and maids to serve outside, she didn't even cough. Now hearing Jia Huan's words, I couldn't help but burst out laughing. The maid was about to go and fetch a bowl, but was stopped by Wang Shifeng. "Don't bother you, I'll personally go find a bowl for Brother Huan." Everyone knows that it must be the second grandmother who wants to tease Brother Huan, so they can't help but look forward to it. Not long after, Wang Shifeng held a small bowl and filled it with rice, bringing it to Jia Huan's side. He asked seriously, "Brother Huan, I wonder if these are enough for you to eat." Everyone laughed. Jia Huan also said seriously, "Thank you very much, second sister-in-law. This bowl is delicious to eat. If it's not enough, please trouble second sister-in-law to serve the rice." Wang Shifeng smiled and said, "Brother Huan, just eat. I don't believe you can still serve what Brother Huan eats." The meal arrived, and Jia Huan continued to chop his chopsticks like flying, enjoying them in large chunks. Pienching Jia Huan's meal did not make people feel vulgar, but rather gave people a very generous feeling. The bowl full of rice was decreasing at a visible speed to the naked eye. Of course, along with it, there is also a decrease in the dishes on the table. This table is full of more than 10 dishes, and if Jia Huan is not here, there won't be much to eat. Jia Mu often rewards people with these dishes. If you don't reward others, the rest will be given to the girls around you to eat. And today, these dishes were eaten by Jia Huan alone. When everyone saw that Jia Huan was eating sweetly, they also had an appetite and ate an extra bowl. Even Jia Mu ate an extra half bowl of rice with her. Before long, Jia Huan ate a bowl of rice clean and tidy. Wang Shifeng's eyes were sharp as he snatched a bowl from Jia Huan's hand and smiled, "Brother Huan, I'll give you another bowl. Let's see how much you can eat today." Jia Huan quickly smiled and said, "Second sister-in-law, don't serve too much. The food here from our ancestors is exquisite, and I have already eaten enough." Wang Shifeng put down his bowl with a smile and said, "Brother Huan, when have you been able to eat like this? You've become a rice bucket." Jia Huan smiled on his face, but let out a cold snort in his heart. He said calmly, "My Jia mansion was originally a family of martial artists, so it's natural to be able to eat it. General Shi Chuanlian can eat 12 pounds of rice and 10 pounds of beef per meal, so that's where I come from." Wang Shifeng was about to mock, but he heard Jia's mother say, "Huan'er is right." Back then, the Duke of Guo could eat these 3 pots of rice, 5 pounds of meat, and even drink a jar of wine in a single meal. But among the younger generation, besides Huan'er, not a single one has this appetite. Everyone has already had their meal while speaking. Each person has a maid holding tea on a small tea tray. Bringing the tea, Lin Daiyu hesitated slightly. "My father once taught me to cherish good fortune and maintain health. After eating a meal, I must wait for the grains to be swallowed up, and then eat tea for a while to avoid hurting my spleen and stomach. But the rules of the Jia family are different from what my father taught me." Just as Lin Daiyu was in a difficult situation, she heard Jia Huan cough lightly. When Lin Daiyu looked up, she noticed that Jia Huan had taken the tea and rinsed it back and forth in her mouth, spitting out the tea in the mouthwash. Lin Daiyu felt grateful in her heart, and even though she had seen someone bring a mouthwash, Daiyu still rinsed her mouth. At this moment, the little girl brought tea again, and this is the tea to eat. Jia Mu said, "You guys go and let's talk freely." After hearing this, Mrs. Wang quickly stood up and chatted a few more words before inviting Feng and Li to go. Jia Huan also left with him. The Lianbao will come back in a while, and then he will use a big amplification move to throw jade. If you don't leave again, it's easy to get hurt by mistake. Although he didn't have much to do inside and outside, Jia's mother was completely unreasonable in her intentions. Lin Daiyu felt a bit disappointed when she saw Jia Huan leave for some reason. Not long after, she heard footsteps outside and a maid came in and smiled, "Baoyu is here." Lin Daiyu didn't know how lazy and ignorant this Baoyu was, but soon she saw it. Wearing a bouquet of inlaid treasure purple gold crown on his head, he raised his eyebrows and grabbed 2 dragons to wipe his forehead with pearl gold. Wearing a large bunch of 2-color gold butterflies and flowers, colorful silk bunches and long tassel palace tapers, covered with a blue and white patterned 8 regiments of Japanese forged tassel jacket, and wearing green satin foundation make-up small court boots. Face like the mid-autumn festival moon, big face treasure. This face is indeed very big. In Lin Daiyu's mind, the 3 words, big face treasure, suddenly came to mind, and she couldn't help but want to laugh. Jia Baoyu paid his respects to Jia's mother, who ordered him to meet Mrs. Wang and come back to see the guests. In no time, Jia Baoyu changed into clothes and returned. Jia Mu smiled and said, "Did the stranger take off his clothes before he saw her? You haven't gone to see your sister yet." Baoyu had already seen an additional sister, and Yu reading www.yuyukeangshu.net predicted that she was the daughter of Aunt Lin, so she quickly came to Bao. After reading it, Baoyu smiled and said, "I have seen this sister before." Upon hearing these words, Lin Daiyu couldn't help but be surprised. Unexpectedly, Brother Huan predicted it again. How did Brother Huan know about this? Then Jia Mu said, "But that's nonsense again. Have you ever seen her?" Baoyu smiled and said, "Although I haven't seen her before, I look kind-hearted, and even though I have an old acquaintance in my heart, it's not impossible for me to just say goodbye and reunite today." Jia Mu smiled and said, "It's better and better. If that's the case, it would be more harmonious." Baoyu approached Daiyu and sat down to carefully examine her. He asked, "Has my sister ever studied?" Daiyu said, "I haven't read it, I only attended school for a year, and I need to recognize a few words." Baoyu said again, "What are the 2 characters for my sister's respected name?" Daiyu then said her name, and Baoyu asked about the characters. Daiyu said she had no characters. Baoyu smiled and said, "I will give my sister a wonderful character, which is as wonderful as the 2 characters frown. At this moment, although Lin Daiyu was talking to Jia Baoyu, her heart was stirred up by a storm. Surprisingly, all of them were hit by Brother Huan. How did Brother Huan guess so accurately? Is Baoyu really going to throw jade next? Next, will my grandmother really arrange for me to go to the Bai Sha cabinet? And Baoyu is going to sleep directly outside the Bai Sha cabinet. Jia Baoyu asked Lin Daiyu again, "Sister, do you have jade?" Lin Daiyu shook her head and said, "I don't have that. I think that jade is a rare thing, where could everyone have it?" Sure enough, he asked me if I had any jade, and I said no. Can he really throw jade? Lin Daiyu couldn't help but look at Jia Baoyu. Chapter 6. Lin Jia's Visit. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Upon hearing this, Baoyu immediately became insane and took off the jade, throwing it fiercely. He cursed and said, "What a rare thing, you can't even choose the height of a person, and even say that you don't have spiritual communication. I don't want this useless thing anymore." The frightened crowd rushed to pick up the jade. Jia Mu anxiously hugged Baoyu and said, "Damn it, it's easy for you to get angry and scold others. Why bother smashing that life root?" Baoyu wept with tears all over her face. "None of my sisters and sisters at home, but I don't think it's fun to have them. Now that we have no fairy-like sisters, we can see that this is not a good thing." Jia Mu quickly comforted him and said, "Your sister originally came here with this. When your aunt passed away, she couldn't bear to part with your sister and couldn't get along with her, so she took his jade with her. One is to fulfill your sister's filial piety with the full burial ceremony, and the other is that the spirit of your aunt can also be used as a gesture of meeting your daughter. Therefore, he only said that there is no such thing, so he cannot exaggerate it himself. How can you compare to him now? It's not easy to take it seriously. Be careful, your mother knows." As he spoke, he picked it up from the maid's hand and personally took it with him. Upon hearing this, Baoyu thought it would make sense, so there was no need to argue otherwise. Beside her, Lin Daiyu, who was originally afraid, sad, and angry and would cry with Baoyu, did not cry. Not only did he not cry, but he also felt a bit amused. All of them were hit by Brother Huan, and as expected, they fell the jade. Lin Daiyu also harbored resentment towards her grandmother's lies. Do people all insist on having jade? Do you want to fall when you see someone without jade? And my grandmother was also confused. She didn't say she would explain the truth to that big-faced treasure, but instead told the story of my deceased mother. How could there be such a truth in this world? At this moment, the wet nurse came to ask about Daiyu's house. Jia Mu said, "Now move the precious jade out with me in the warm pavilion of the suite, and temporarily place your Miss Lin in the Baisha cabinet. After the end of winter, we will tidy up the house with them in spring and make another arrangement." Upon hearing this, Jia Baoyu quickly said, "Good ancestor, it's safe for me to be on the bed outside the Baisha cabinet. Why come out again to make trouble for the old ancestor?" Upon hearing this, Lin Daiyu's pupils couldn't help but contract slightly. What kind of nonsense is this talking about? Men and women give and receive without marriage. Is there any reason why I live in the Baisha cabinet and he lives outside? A grand mansion, don't you understand the principle of incompatibility between men and women? Lin Daiyu looked at Jia's mother and found that she was hesitating and even had some intention of agreeing. Lin Daiyu quickly said, "Grandmother, how can this be resolved? The saying goes that men and women are not compatible. If this happens, not only will it ruin my reputation, but even the reputation of my second brother will also be affected. This matter must not be avoided." Upon hearing this, Jia Mu sighed and said, "Huan'er is also saying the same thing. Then move Baoyu out and join me in the warm pavilion of the suite. Each person has a wet nurse and a maid to take care of them, while the rest stay up at night outside to listen." Shifeng had already ordered someone to give a lotus root-colored flower tent and several brocade quilts and satin bedding. Daiyu only brought 2 people, one was Wang Mama, a wet nurse since childhood, and the other was a 10-year-old girl, also known as Shuyan, a name she had carried with her since childhood. Jia Mu saw that Shuyan was very young and childish, and Wang Mama was extremely old. It was expected that Daiyu was not willing to worry about it. Then she gave a second-class girl named Parrot to Daiyu. For example, in the case of welcoming spring, in addition to being a nursing mother since childhood, each person also has 4 guiding mothers. In addition to the 2 maids in charge of Hairpin and Chuan personally, there are also 5 or 6 little maids who sweep the houses and perform duties. At present, Mama Wang and Inga are accompanying Daiyu in the Baisha cabinet. Li Mama, the wet nurse of Baoyu, and a maid named Shiren, accompanied her in the warm pavilion of the suite. The next day, Jia Huan woke up early and went for a run as usual. After paying his respects to the old lady Mrs. Huan, he returned to study silently. After breakfast, Jia Huan rested for half an hour, still persistently studying silently. At this moment, Lin Daiyu came as a guest. Coincidentally, Aunt Xiao is outside the study today. Originally, Aunt Zhao was a busy person. After setting rules with Mrs. Wang, she used to have short conversations with people from different backgrounds. Don't underestimate Aunt Zhao's social skills. She is already a family-born child, and there is no one in the entire family that she does not know. Although Aunt Zhao is crude and despicable, which women are so good. I can always find people with similar tastes. But these days, Aunt Zhao has almost given up her hobby. She likes to come to Jia Huan's place, sit outside the study, do needlework, and occasionally watch Jia Huan study hard and write, which makes her very happy. Seeing Lin Daiyu as a guest, Aunt Zhao was pleasantly surprised to the point of feeling a little anxious and fearful. She is a person with low self-esteem, and her greatest desire is to gain recognition from others. In the book, Shui Dazi went out to do business after being beaten and came back with some things. Shui Baochai was giving gifts next to Jia's mansion, even Jia Huan had one. After receiving the gift, Aunt Zhao couldn't help but praise Shui Baochai for being a decent person. Jia Huan, no one came here originally. Even his own sister, Tan Chun, hasn't been here many times. As for Baoyu, Ying Chun, Shichuan, and others, they will not be so extravagant and humble. Now that Miss Lin, who is so esteemed, has just arrived at the Jia mansion and unexpectedly visited her, how can she not surprise Aunt Zhao to the point of being overjoyed? Aunt Zhao quickly stood up and, with a smile on her face, even said somewhat humbly, "Miss Lin is here. Sit inside quickly, good luck, serve tea quickly." Lin Daiyu quickly said, "Auntie, I just came over after tea." "Auntie, there's no need to worry. I'm here to find Brother Huan. Is Brother Huan at home?" Upon hearing this, Aunt Zhao became even more delighted. She pulled her neck and shouted, "Huan'er, come out quickly. Miss Lin is looking for you to play." Jia Huan expected that Lin Daiyu would definitely find him today, so he smiled and said, "Miss Lin, come to the study and talk." Lin Daiyu pursed her lips and smiled as she entered the study. Seeing Jia Huan writing, she walked over to him and glanced at him, saying, "Unexpectedly, Brother Huan has already read about the doctrine of the mean and will definitely be able to become the top scorer in the future." The word Brother Huan is written a bit ugly. The two only met yesterday, and the scene was not pleasant. But after everything Jia Huan said was true, Lin Daiyu unconsciously classified Jia Huan as a good person. Therefore, when I came to visit today, it was natural to joke with Jia Huan. Upon hearing these, Jia Huan's face couldn't help but turn black. It's truly Lin Jia's fault, he is indeed a sharp-toothed and black-bellied person. Jia Huan knew that Lin Daiyu had finished reading the 4 books and 5 classics, and now he has only reached the doctrine of the mean. What is there to praise? As for his handwriting, it is indeed a bit immature. After all, he has only traveled for 4 days and has not yet fully picked up his calligraphy. Jia Huan rolled his eyes and said, "Although my handwriting is ugly, I think it's beautiful." Lin Daiyu was amused by Jia Huan's words and giggled. After a moment, Lin Daiyu asked, "Brother Huan, how do you know what Baoyu can say and even throw jade?" Chapter 7. Fairy, quickly collect your divine powers. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Upon hearing Lin Daiyu's question, Jia Huan smiled slightly and said, "Of course I know what he will say. I have heard him say this to several girls. As for throwing jade, it's my guess. As for Baoyu, it's still a child's nature to attract girls' attention through this way, which is understandable." Lin Daiyu pursed her lips and smiled, "But Brother Huan, you are 2 years younger than Baoyu. By the way, Brother Huan, I believe I have no grudges with my second wife. Why did she kill me?" Speaking of which, Lin Daiyu's eyes had already turned red and were filled with mist. Jia Huan said, "Sister Lin, it's not enough to kill you. Madam probably just wants to drive you out of the Jia mansion. Before Aunt Min got married, the two of them didn't get along very well. My wife probably suffered a few hidden losses from Aunt Min's hands, and there was also resentment towards the house and Wu. Another reason is that my wife doesn't want Baoyu to come too close to you. That's probably why my wife is like this. Lin Daiyu said to Jia Huan, thank you very much for telling me these things. Daiyu is immensely grateful for Huan's support. After speaking, I felt sad about my background and thought about my future situation in the Jia family, which made me burst into tears. Lin Daiyu's situation in the Jia family is really bad. It has been the same in her past and present lives. Otherwise, she would not have written in the funeral chant. For 360 days a year, the wind, swords, and frost are fiercely pressing against each other. When can the bright and beautiful beauty last? It's hard to find it once it drifts away. Upon seeing this, Jia Huan quickly advised, Fairy, quickly collect your divine powers. If it were a normal persuasion, Lin Daiyu would naturally be useless when she was feeling sad. But Jia Huan's words were too bizarre. Upon hearing them, Lin Daiyu couldn't help but lift her tearful eyes and look at Jia Huan in confusion. Just as Jia Huan continued, we can't go any further. We really can't go any further. Now that there's already a flood on the ground, if we go any further, we'll wash away the small ones. Lin Daiyu was amused by Jia Huan's words and burst into laughter with a burst of tears. She said awkwardly, Brother Huan, you are such a narrow-minded and talkative person. I just entered the mansion and I hated my second wife. What will happen in the future? Speaking like this, I couldn't help but shed tears again. Jia Huan sneered and said, Sister Lin, why do you punish yourself for the evil of others? Isn't this more in line with their wishes? What's wrong with Madam? You still have an old lady to love you. What's wrong with Madam Heir biting you? It's a big deal, so don't go to her in the future. Sister Lin, if you don't, you will feel sad and upset for these bad people, and if you don't, you will waste your body. It's better to cry less and smile more in the future. Jia Huan's persuasion surprisingly caught Lin Daiyu's attention, and upon closer reflection, it was indeed reasonable. It's really foolish to think about how to be sad and upset for the wicked, to waste one's own body. At this moment, Jia Huan handed a handkerchief, and Lin Daiyu took it, wiping away her tears. The handkerchief was collected by Lin Daiyu and she said, Brother Huan, this handkerchief is dirty. I will wash it clean for you when I go back and bring it back to you. Jia Huan said magnanimously, It's okay, I won't find you dirty. Lin Daiyu chuckled and said, Brother Huan, your mouth is really. Just then, Jia Baoyu walked in from outside. It turned out that after Jia Baoyu had eaten, she couldn't forget the fairy-like Lin sister who had just arrived yesterday and went to the Baisha cabinet to play with her. When they arrived at the Baisha cabinet, they were told that Lin Daiyu was not there and went to the Huan'er house. Jia Baoyu chased after her all the way, and as soon as she entered the room, she saw the fairy-like Lin sister and Jia Huan talking and laughing happily. Jia Baoyu's face suddenly pulled up. There is always a feeling of someone snatching away something beloved. Jia Baoyu walked up to Lin Daiyu and was about to pull her hand. He said, Sister Lin, come and play in my house. I don't have anything good for you. And when Lin Daiyu saw Jia Baoyu about to hold her hand, her face immediately changed. She quickly took 2 steps back and said with anger, Brother Bao, it's not fitting for men and women to give and receive. Please take care of yourself, Brother Bao. In the original plot of the Red Chamber, Lin Daiyu was actually aware of Mrs. Wang's malice. But because I was not mentioned beforehand, my feelings were not as strong as they are now. And the first time she met Jia Baoyu, in the original plot, she felt as if she had seen Jia Baoyu somewhere, so familiar with her face, but in fact, she had some good feelings for him. Nowadays, when I first see Jia Baoyu, my first impression is de Lianbao. And the words that Jia Baoyu said afterwards were recorded by Jia Huan every sentence. Even the subsequent act of throwing jade was anticipated. After hearing Jia Baoyu say that to countless girls again today, her impression of Jia Baoyu was only disgusted. This mother and son pair, one is evil and the other is disgusted, there is simply no good person. Therefore, now that Baoyu is coming to hold her hand, how can she not be angry? Baoyu was completely stunned. Never before had a girl treated him like this. He was both surprised and angry, and his face turned red as he felt abandoned by the whole world. Then, subconsciously, he touched the jade worn around his neck. Jia Huan immediately realized something was wrong. Is this big face treasure going to amplify the technique of throwing jade again? Jia Huan couldn't help but be speechless for a moment. He threw a jade just to solve a problem. Why didn't you throw a jade when he was driving out the golden bracelet? Why didn't you throw the jade when driving Qingwen away? Why didn't you throw the jade when Daiyu fell? A whole junk dim sum, nothing. But today we can't let this rubbish dim sum throw jade in this room, otherwise we will suffer from the disaster of pond fish. Jia Huan quickly stood up and walked 2 steps to Baoyu. He grabbed his hand as he threw the jade and said, "Oh dear, Sister Bao, what are you doing? Isn't it because of Lin's unparalleled appearance being compared to younger sister that she feels sad and sad?" Jia Baoyu was also amused by Jia Huan's words, and he couldn't help but say, "Huan'er, what are you talking nonsense about? What Sister Bao? Look, I won't tear your mouth apart." The words were spoken to Jia Huan, but her eyes kept looking at Lin Daiyu. When I saw that Lin Daiyu had never had a good expression towards him, and even had a hint of contempt, my mood became even worse. But at this point, there was no atmosphere of throwing jade anymore, and Jia Huan was still holding his hand. Jia Baoyu snorted and broke free, then turned around and walked out. Lin Daiyu said anxiously, "Brother Huan, it's all my fault for causing you trouble." Jia Huan smiled and said, "Sister Lin, it's irrelevant. Even if there's no such thing as this, wouldn't my situation be better? By the way, Sister Lin, if you want to be healthy, you need to maintain a good mood and exercise in moderation. I have a set of health-preserving exercises here, which you can do every day when you have time, which is beneficial for your body." Chapter 8. Assassination without intention to report black cases. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Next, Jia Huan taught Lin Daiyu a simplified version of the 5-animal play. This set of 5 birds operette doesn't have too many complex movements, but it can move the whole body without making people too tired, which is very suitable for Lin Daiyu's situation. After teaching it 4 or 5 times, Lin Daiyu learned this set of movements. Jia Huan said, "Sister Lin, remember to take the time to do this action every day in the future. If you persist for a long time, it will definitely help your body gradually improve, and you can even avoid taking medication in the future." In fact, Jia Huan also has a dietary supplement plan, but now his identity is awkward and he cannot change Lin Daiyu's diet, so he didn't say much. Lin Daiyu gave Jia Huan a deep glance and said, "Brother Huan, thank you very much for your care." Jia Huan waved his hand and said, "Why is Sister Lin so polite? What is it worth? Besides, if you're truly grateful, just talk about it and it's over. Will you give me a reward of 1.8 million taels of silver in the future?" Lin Daiyu was amused by Jia Huan and burst out laughing. "Brother Huan, your mouth really caught up with your second sister. Lol." At this moment, the Mandarin duck walked in from outside. Yuanyang is wearing a semi-new lotus-colored silk jacket, a green satin teething vest, and a water-green skirt underneath. I saw her with a beeline waist and a shaved back, a duck-egg face, black hair, a tall nose, and a few slight freckles on both cheeks. After entering, Yuanyang first bowed to Lin Daiyu and Jia Huan. "I have met Miss Lin and Brother Huan." In fact, the servants in the mansion should have been called the Third Lord of the Ring when they saw such a serious master as Jia Huan. However, in order to make a living, Mrs. Jia does not allow people to call her that. Jia Mu's precious egg Baoyu, which maids only call Baoyu when they see Jia Huan, and only call Huan'er when they see Jia Huan. Jia Huan quickly stood up and said, Sister Yuanyang is a distinguished guest who rarely visits. Sister Yuanyang's arrival has made my shabby room shine brightly. Yuanyang smiled and said, I heard that Brother Huan has been studying hard lately, and even his speech has changed. Your ancestors asked you to come over. Upon hearing this, Jia Huan felt something was amiss. No need to ask, it must be the Lianbao who is causing some trouble again. Jia Huanin asked, Sister Yuanyang, my ancestors asked me to come over, and I don't know what I've eaten with dried pork. Yuanyang said, Baoyu went to the old lady's house in a sullen mood. When the old lady asked him, he didn't say anything. The old lady called Shiren to inquire. Shiren said that Baoyu first went to Miss Lin's place to play with her, and then found Brother Huan's place. He came out from Brother Huan's place and that's all. I think it's because Brother Huan collided with Baoyu somewhere. The old lady asked you to come over and ask questions. Upon hearing this, Jia Huan's face couldn't help but turn black. He thought it was a black expression from the Lianbao, but he didn't expect it to be an attack. When Jia Huan first read Dream of the Red Chamber, he felt that Shiren was a traitor. Arrogantly gentle and gentle, the clouds in the sky are like laurels like orchids. I envy the good actors for their blessings, but to my surprise, the young master has no chance. It is clear that he devoted himself wholeheartedly to serving Jia Baoyu, with all his heart tied to him. However, in the end, he married someone wholeheartedly. After watching it a few more times, I felt that the Lianbao was just a useless and irresponsible person. Provoking women everywhere, but unable to protect even the women around me. The Lianbao himself is a promiscuous playboy. Why should he make Shiren defend himself like a jade? After watching it a few more times, I couldn't help but break out in a cold sweat when I saw the plot of the assault report again. Let's first hear how Shiren filed a complaint. Madame Wang asked, did Baoyu and anyone cause trouble? Xian Ren. Madam, don't be too careless. There's no such thing as that. This is just my little insight. Now that Yi is also older, the girls inside are also older. Moreover, Miss Lin and Miss Bao are also cousins of the two aunts. Although they are sisters, there is still a distinction between men and women. Sitting up and down day and night is inconvenient, and it can't help but make people feel uneasy, even if outsiders don't look like it. A family's affairs, as the saying goes, have nothing to think about for a long time. Many mindless people in the world mostly do things unintentionally, and those who have a heart see them as having a heart, but instead speak ill of it. Just being unprepared is definitely not good. The second master's usual personality is known to his wife. He is good at causing trouble in our team. If we don't take precautions, he may have made a slight mistake in front and back, regardless of whether it's true or false. There are many people and a lot of gossip, so what's the taboo of that petty person's mouth? There is still a long section left, and there is no need to extract it all anymore. Just by looking at the above two paragraphs, one can truly feel the strong concern, unwavering loyalty, and cautious gaze of Shiren. But if analyzed carefully, that's not the case at all. Shiren went to report, saying that I was very worried about my wife and worried about what might happen to Baoyu regarding gender issues. Mrs. Wang asked who Baoyu was with and what did that mean. Shiren said, no. Actually, isn't it? At least she has a relationship beyond friendship with Baoyu herself. There should also be some confusion between Bai Chen and Bao Eryi, but they didn't mention these assaults. She only said that although not, there may be some in the future. Although it may not be possible, we must also prevent others from creating something out of nothing. What is the difference between this statement and Qin Hui's unfounded statement? Even more excessive than unnecessary, there may be some meaning in unnecessary. And here in Shiren, there is nothing to report. Because of her accusation, Qingwen was ultimately kicked out by Mrs. Wang. Shiren, who had a relationship with Baoyu, did nothing and successfully rose to power as a result. Qingwen, who was pure and innocent with Baoyu, was actually kicked out, unable to get up, and passed away. And Qingwen never knew until her death that it was Shiren who was accusing her of being black. How can one not be surprised to be able to do this? Moreover, Shiren filed a complaint, which was only written once in the Book of Red Mansions, but in reality, it was far more than just this time. In chapter 77, while Mrs. Wang was driving away Qingwen, Seer, and Fangguan at the Yihong courtyard, Yu read a book at www.yuyukangshu.net and mentioned that Seer had given birth to a husband and wife on the same year, month, and day, and Fangguan quietly urged Baoyu to ask for the fifth son of the Lu family. Do you know that although my body is not big, my heart, ears, and mind are always here? Later, Jia Baoyu also suspected. How could we know if we were talking nonsense without permission? It's strange that no one else has gone out of touch. Why doesn't everyone's wife know, just pick out you and the musk moon autumn pattern? Upon hearing these words, Shiren's heart moved and he lowered his head for a while without an answer. This has basically been confirmed, and it is also a case of assaulting someone behind the scenes. Just as Jia Huan was thinking about inheriting someone comparable to Qin Hui, Lin Daiyu said, "I'll go with you. It's me who provoked Second Master Bao, and I'll apologize to him on my own. It's nothing to do with Brother Huan." Jia Huan smiled slightly and said, "Sister Lin, it's really me who caused this matter. Besides, if you admit your mistake, it will make it difficult for the old lady and lady to do it. In the end, the blame will still fall on me, so it's better for me to bear it from the beginning." Upon hearing this, Lin Daiyu's eyes had already turned red and she was about to cry. Jia Huan couldn't help but say, "Sister Lin, have you forgotten what I said? Why punish yourself with the mistakes of others? For me, it's just a few sentences of punishment. It's irrelevant, you just need to watch coldly." Upon hearing these words, Lin Daiyu regained her powers and looked at Jia Huan with gratitude and guilt. Next to it, the Mandarin duck thought it was strange. Brother Huan, it's really like a different person, and he still has such insight. Soon, the three of them arrived at Jia Mu's residence. From afar, a little girl rolled up the door curtain and shouted, "Miss Lin, Brother Huan is here." The three of them took a step and walked into the room. Chapter 9. Eccentric Jia Mu. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. Inside the room, Jia's mother sat in the center, and Jia Baoyu was held in her arms, feeling unhappy. Mrs. Wang sat on the lower side, with a few little maids standing still to serve. Upon entering the room, Jia Huan greeted Jia Mu and Mrs. Wang first. "Greetings to our ancestors and wives." Jia's mother looked stern and scolded, "Brother Huan, you are also a young master from a big family. Don't you know what it means to have a clear distinction between legitimate and illegitimate, and to have an orderly growth and young age? Why do you want to contradict your second brother Bao?" Mrs. Wang looked at Jia Huan with sharp eyes. Jia Huan said with a guilty face, "What our ancestors taught us was that it was all our grandchildren's fault. Our grandchildren are willing to be punished." Jia Mu angrily said, "Tell me, where did you go wrong? What is it?" Upon hearing these four words, Jia Huan's brain suddenly went down. These four words are probably the most hated by men in later generations, right? How could this old lady know this too? Jia Huan apologized again and said, "My ancestors said that my grandson was wrong, so naturally he is wrong. As for where he was wrong, my grandson doesn't know, so he has to consult with Brother Bao. Brother Bao, I don't know where I went against you. I hope Brother Bao teaches me, and I will definitely correct it in the future." Upon hearing these words, Jia Mu's face became increasingly angry. She looked down at Baoyu and asked, "Baoyu, how did Brother Huan confront you?" After asking a few times, Baoyu said shyly, "Ancestor, Brother Huan has never opposed me. It's just that Sister Lin and Brother Huan are talking and laughing, but they ignore me. After Baoyu finished speaking, the room couldn't help but remain quiet, and the atmosphere at the scene was once very awkward. Jia Mu called Jia Huan over and scolded him, only to realize that he had not made any mistakes. Even more awkwardly, Jia Huan did not admit his mistake and had a good attitude, without any discrimination. Jia Mu took a deep breath and said, "Brother Huan, I heard you've been studying hard lately. You should study hard in the future and don't be so mischievous anymore. I don't need you to come here every day to greet me. You go ahead." Although Jia Huan did not make any mistakes, he was still despised by his mother and even saved his unconscious thoughts. Jia Huan said respectfully, "Yes, my grandchildren have all obeyed the instructions of our ancestors. My grandchildren are leaving." In the ear room next to her, Li Wan was 3 spring apart, with a strange expression on her face. The old lady's favoritism is evident here. After Jia Huan left, Jia's mother summoned Lin Daiyu to her side and ordered, "Don't play with Brother Huan in the future, he's not a good person. You'll only play with your sisters and Baoyu in the future." After Jia Mu's words, Mrs. Wang's face next to her suddenly showed a look of disgust and malice. On Lin Daiyu's face, a hint of shame and anger appeared, and then disappeared. She whispered, "Yes, my grandmother." After hearing these words, Baoyu in Jia's mother's arms suddenly became happy. He couldn't help but reach out to grab Daiyu's hand and said happily, "Sister Lin, where do I have any fun things? I'll take you to take a look." Lin Daiyu retreated silently, avoiding Jia Baoyu's hand, and said solemnly, "Brother Bao, it's not fitting for men and women to give or receive. Please be careful, Brother Bao. If it spreads, it will also hinder Bao-er-Ji's reputation." Lin Daiyu's words made Mrs. Wang's disgust and malice in her eyes even more severe. Although she doesn't like Lin Daiyu, she doesn't like Jia Baoyu getting too close to Lin Daiyu. But Lin Daiyu's disdain for Baoyu made her even more angry. Just a disappointed sick girl, why pretend to be aloof? What qualifications do you have to despise my precious jade? The disgust and malice in Mrs. Wang's eyes were accidentally caught by Lin Daiyu, but Lin Daiyu's heart did not stir much. Once again being despised by Lin Daiyu, Jia Baoyu's face was coquettish, and he got up and walked out with Lin Daiyu. Looking at the figures of the two, Jia Mu wore a kind smile like an old mother on her face. Although Huan'er seemed to have some disdain for Baoyu just now. But Jia Mu believes in Baoyu's strength. When it comes to being meticulous, considerate, and patient with girls, he is no weaker than anyone else. These 2 children will eventually come together. But what she didn't see was that Lin Daiyu, who had just walked out of Rongqing Hall and endured for a long time in the room, asked Jia Baoyu with a stern face, "Brother Bao, it's clear that I offended you. I'll accompany you and not implicate good people again in the future." Lin Daiyu's words made Jia Baoyu's face turn red, and his aggrieved eyes turned red, almost crying. He tried to hold back and said, "Sister Lin, why did I ever blame you? Also, it's not my intention to implicate Brother Huan. The old lady asked me. What I haven't said until now is that the old lady called Shiren, and Shiren told the old lady." Lin Daiyu sneered and said, "This is strange. Even though I offended Brother Bao, I was clearly not present when I attacked him. Why did she insist that Brother Huan offended you? Did she have a grudge against Brother Huan, or did she receive someone's instruction?" Jia Baoyu gritted her teeth and said, "This talkative person is clearly afraid of taking responsibility and deliberately blaming Brother Huan. Please rest assured, Sister Lin. After I go back, I will punish her." Lin Daiyu sneered and said, "Your girl, it's up to you how you want to punish her. But don't punish her because of me. If that's the case, it would be my fault." Jia Baoyu couldn't speak for a moment, and he wanted to reach out to pull Lin Daiyu's hand. However, soon after, he thought of Lin Daiyu's 2 rejections and withdrew his hand awkwardly. He said to Lin Daiyu, "Sister Lin, where do I have a small basket made of willow twigs, a whole bamboo incense box, a clay stack stove, and so on that I bought outside?" I like it when I see it. Lin Daiyu said solemnly, where is brother Bao? I dare not go. Where is brother Huan? No one has seen it yet, and it has caused so many crimes. I don't know what's going to happen when I get to you. After speaking, Lin Daiyu left without hesitation. Afterwards, Jia Baoyu's face changed from red to purple, from purple to blue, and then from blue to white, like a chameleon. After a while, he left wearily. After returning to the house, Shiren quickly welcomed him and asked with a smile, Baoyu, what's wrong with this? Who offended you? Or did brother Huan offend you? The old lady didn't call him to scold her. Jia Baoyu was already full of anger, and hearing this further fueled the fire. He was angry from the bottom of his heart, and evil grew towards his gallbladder. He stepped up and kicked the attacker directly to the ground. Who messed with me? It's you who messed with me. Humph, who told you that brother Huan bumped into me? Brother Huan was clearly a good person, but you falsely accused me. How could there be someone like you around me? Stop, with your temperament, I dare not stay by your side. I will definitely go back to the old lady and let you go. When there was such a commotion outside, a group of young girls suddenly surrounded them. Chapter 10. From being the first stream in flowers. You are listening at novelfull.audio. 7 or 8 maids, big and small, such as Shiwe, Choshan, Tanyun, Baikan, etc., all gathered around with a shout. At this moment, Shiren also endured the pain on his body and struggled to get up and kneel on the ground, sobbing, please forgive me, second Master Bao. Don't drive me out. Even if I make a mistake, I am wholeheartedly thinking for second Master's sake. If I were to be driven out like this, I would never have the face to live again. Jia Baoyu sneered and said, are you wholeheartedly thinking for me? I see you're trying to make me angry. Do you know you're shameless? If you keep me, I'm still shameless. Well, I can't tolerate someone as scheming as you in my room. In the house, Shiren has always been a kind person and is good to everyone. Therefore, when they saw Baoyu about to drive out Shiren, all the maids knelt down to beg for Baoyu. Please forgive me, second master, and don't drive away Sister Shiren. At this moment, Mrs. Jia and Mrs. Wang, along with a group of maids and mother-in-law, walked in a grand and imposing manner. Originally, the commotion here had already alarmed the women outside. These women dared not neglect and quickly reported to Jia Mu. For some unknown reason, Jia Mu and Mrs. Wang rushed over in a hurry. After entering, he saw a maid kneeling on the ground, and Baoyu's face was flushed with purple, not as angry as before. Jia's mother's anger surged in her heart. She hugged Baoyu and comforted him, saying, Baoyu, that's not good. If you want to fight or scold, just give orders. How could you get so angry? After speaking, he turned his head and sternly rebuked the maids kneeling on the ground, you little wave hooves, I've always heard that you don't follow the rules. I ignored them and didn't expect you to get more satisfied. I found out that it's not good. Give it a beating and just pull it out to support the kid. Shiren, you know, who's causing the trouble. Shiren was originally a maid by Jia's side, and she had always gained her trust. Therefore, at this moment, she just went to ask Shiren. I never thought that this chaos was actually caused by assaulting someone. Upon hearing Jia's mother's question, Shiren blushed and said, Ancestor, it was me who made Bao Yi angry. Bao Yi was about to kick me out, woo-woo. How could that be so? Jia Mu was taken aback and asked Jia Baoyu, Baoyu, Shiren has always been a good girl, and that's why I gave her to you. What did she do wrong? Are you going to kick her out? If it were another girl, where would Jia ask? She would just pull her out and beat her up, and then go with the boy. And Shiren was a maid sent out by Jia's mother, so she couldn't help but ask. Jia Baoyu said with tears on his face, Ancestor, this is what happened today. I went to Brother Huan's house, and Brother Huan never opposed me. She didn't know the reason at all and dared to casually say that it was Brother Huan who opposed me, which actually led to Brother Huan being scolded by her ancestors. Today has implicated Brother Huan in a small matter. If she continues to speak nonsense in the future, what will happen if it affects others? I dare not stay in the house with such a person anymore. Our ancestors still took her back, either rewarded her or went to marry a child, and I don't care. Shiren cried loudly on the ground, feeling sad and sorrowful. Those who hear it shed tears, while those who see it feel sad. She felt infinitely aggrieved in her heart. When I said Brother Huan had bumped into you in the old lady's room, you didn't say I was talking nonsense. How to blame me again after the fact? In fact, Jia Baoyu was completely provoked by Lin Daiyu's sarcastic remarks, which ignited his anger and directed it towards attacking someone. If Lin Daiyu were willing to play happily with him, he would have put this matter aside long ago. How could he have thought of wronging Brother Huan? Upon hearing this, Jia Mu couldn't help but furrow her brows, realizing that it was because of that villain that many things had happened. Jia's mother's disgust towards Jia Huan couldn't help but increase by 3 points. And Mrs. Wang next to her even more despised Lin Daiyu. She felt that this matter was entirely caused by Lin Daiyu. Before this short-lived girl arrived, how could there have been such a mess at home? Now that we have only been here for a few days, it has caused so much trouble that the family is not peaceful. And judging from the old lady's thoughts, she actually wanted to match the two of them. Mrs. Wang's face was uncertain, and she thought to herself that she must not let Baoyu marry that Lin maid with a short face. Otherwise, the house would be in turmoil. After thinking for a moment, Jia Mu said to Jia Baoyu, "Baoyu, Shiren was trained by me alone. I know this girl's temperament very well. Besides, how does she usually treat you?" Jia Baoyu thought for a moment and said, "Ancestor, she used to be a good person, but..." Jia Mu quickly interrupted Baoyu's words and said, "You also know that she is a good person. How can a person not make mistakes? Even that sage can make mistakes sometimes. The saying goes, knowing one's mistake can change it. It's a great kindness. After she made a mistake this time, she will never make another mistake again." Shiren, who was kneeling on the ground, quickly said, "Master Bao, I know I was wrong. If I want to do it again in the future, teach me how to hit the 5 thunder bombs in heaven, and I won't die easily." Jia Mu said, "Baoyu, this girl also knows she's wrong, so please spare her this time. Find Shuyuan www.jiaoshuyuan.com." Jia Baoyu nodded and said, "Since our ancestors have pleaded for her, I will spare her for now. If she dares to speak up again in the future, I will not spare her." Jia Mu took Baoyu out and quelled the farce. After leaving Jia Baoyu, Lin Daiyu went straight to Jia Huan's study. She apologetically said to Jia Huan, "Brother Huan, it was me who caused you trouble. You were punished by the old lady. I really apologize." Jia Huan smiled and said, "I've already said it's irrelevant, just relax your mind." Seeing that Lin Daiyu was still full of guilt, Jia Huan couldn't help but shake his head and said, "Sister Lin, there's no need for that. I'll write a poem by Lian to give to you. This poem perfectly matches Sister Lin's temperament and grace." After speaking, Jia Huan directly picked up his pen and wrote a poem by Lian, Partridge Sky, and Osmanthus. Next to her, Lin Daiyu was thinking of Lian with a puzzled expression on her face. Is there Lian among the famous poets of all dynasties? How come I don't know? Is he an unknown poet? Just thinking about it, Jia Huan over there has already finished writing this poem and is ready to dry the handwriting before giving it to Lin Daiyu. Lin Daiyu couldn't help but walk over and look at this poem. Dim and light, the corpus luteum is soft in nature, with sparse emotions and distant traces, leaving only fragrance. Why light turquoise and deep red? It is the first class among flowers. Mei Ding is jealous, chrysanthemuming is shy, painting the mid-autumn festival crown where the wings open. A pitiful person can be ruthless in thinking, why didn't they see it back then? After reading this poem, Lin Daiyu only felt a strong sense of loyalty, a towering spirit, and a lingering fragrance on her lips and teeth. Huan'er said that this poem was given to me, and it also fits my temperament and style. But where am I so good? How can it be paired with such a word? This poem is clearly a portrayal of Huan'er himself.